On my 63rd birthday, my son gave his father-in-law an $18,000 wine cellar renovation and handed me a $10 lottery ticket he'd picked up at a gas station on the way over. I know because I could still see the fuel receipt folded underneath it when he slid it across the table. There were 26 people at Cornelius Hatch's lakefront estate that evening. Long table, white linen, catered food, the kind of birthday dinner you host when you want people to understand your net worth before they've finished their first glass of wine. Cornelius had insisted on hosting. My son's wife, Portia, had agreed with the enthusiasm of someone who'd spent most of our relationship trying to figure out the most graceful way to leave me out of things. I spent 31 years as a principal at Asheville Regional, the public high school on the east side of town, where most of the kids came in, not sure they were going to make it to graduation, and left 4 years later with options. That was the job. That's what I gave my life to. It doesn't sound impressive in a room full of people who made their money in commercial real estate development. And in that room, Cornelius Hatch made sure everyone knew it. He raised his glass about 20 minutes into the meal. "I want to celebrate a man who has dedicated his life to public service," he said, looking at me with the kind of smile you give someone when you're technically paying them a compliment and actually making them smaller. Of course, I've always believed the real work happens when you're building something that outlasts a retirement ceremony. But different paths, different callings. Polite laughter, the kind that fills silence. My son laughed, too. He's 34 years old. He has his mother's eyes and, as far as I can tell, very little else of her in him. She passed 8 years ago, breast cancer, quick and devastating. She was the kind of woman who held a family together with a particular quiet grace that you don't notice until it's gone. After she died, my son threw himself into work, into ambition, into Portia Hatch, and everything that came with marrying into her family. I don't blame him for wanting a different life than the one he grew up in. I blame him for deciding mine was worth so little by comparison. Halfway through the main course, my son stood up. He had an envelope. He'd called ahead to ask Cornelius's assistant what he might want, coordinated with a contractor, arranged the whole thing. New shelving, climate control upgrades, an engraved display case for a wine collection that already occupied a full temperature-controlled room on the lower level of the estate. Cornelius stood and embraced my son like a man receiving something he'd always deserved. My daughter-in-law was radiant. The table applauded. Then my son looked at me, and Dad. He pulled the lottery ticket from his jacket pocket and set it next to my plate. Figured you could use a little luck. A few people chuckled. Someone at the far end of the table clapped me on the shoulder. I picked up the ticket. Mega Millions quick pick, printed 3 days earlier based on the timestamp. I folded it and put it in my jacket pocket. "Thanks," I said. I drove home alone that night and sat in the kitchen my parents had built 40 years ago, and I thought about what it costs a man to keep his mouth shut. Before I go any further, if you've ever sat at a table full of people and felt like the room would not notice if you simply disappeared, leave a 1 in the comments. And if you want to find out what happened 3 weeks later, stay with me. Because the story doesn't end at that dinner table. Not even close. This story includes some creative elements, but the truth at its center is real. Let's keep going. I'm 63 years old, retired. Pension plus a little consulting work puts me at roughly $4,000 a month. Enough to live on. Not enough to impress anyone at Cornelius Hatch's dinner table. I live in the same 3-bedroom house in West Asheville, where I grew up, the one my parents paid off before they died and left to me. I have 2 children. My daughter is 30 years old. She works as a physical therapist at Mission Hospital, and she has her mother's patience and her mother's habit of seeing through people immediately. She called me the morning after the birthday dinner, early, before I'd made coffee. "Dad, you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." Long pause. "You're not fine. That was embarrassing, and I'm sorry I didn't say something at the table." I told her I didn't need her fighting my battles. She said that wasn't the point. She was right. My daughter and I grew close in the way parents and children sometimes do through shared crisis. 2 years ago, a patient fell into her during a session, a large man who lost his balance and knocked her sideways into a treatment table. Slipped disc, torn rotator cuff, 6 weeks non-weight bearing, 3 surgeries over 14 months. She walks without a limp now, and she's back to full caseload. But the bills don't care about recovery timelines. Hospital insurance covered most of it. Her personal policy covered more. What remained was $94,000. I went to 2 banks and a credit union. All of them said the same thing: pension income, one house as the only real asset, not enough collateral they could liquidate quickly. No. My son called me on a Tuesday. He'd heard through my daughter. He drove to my house in a car I couldn't afford in 3 lifetimes and sat at my kitchen table and offered me a loan. Family rate, he said. You need the money and I have it. Simple. I should have read every page before I signed. I should have asked to take it home overnight. I should have called a lawyer. But I was sitting across from my son, who was handing me a rope while I was drowning, and I just signed. 2 months later, when the first payment notice arrived, I pulled the contract out of the filing drawer and actually read it. 36% APR, compounding monthly, collateral listed as my house at 114 Briarwood Lane, Asheville, North Carolina, valued at $480,000. If I defaulted, his LLC had the right to initiate foreclosure proceedings within 30 days. Monthly payment, $2,900. My pension is $4,200 a month. I called him. That's my son, this interest rate. Market rate for a high-risk private loan, Dad. 3 banks already turned you down. You want me to call the full balance due right now? 30 days notice. It's in the contract. I made the payments, every month, watching the principal barely move while the interest rewrote everything underneath it. The birthday dinner was 8 months into those payments. 3 weeks after the dinner, my daughter called on a Saturday afternoon. She had a particular tone she uses. When she's trying to sound casual about something, she's actually very serious about. Dad, did you ever check that lottery ticket? I almost laughed. Sweetheart. I looked up the Mega Millions numbers from that night. Just humor me and check it. I found the ticket still folded in the pocket of the same jacket. I smoothed it out on the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. I'm not going to drag this out the way it happened in real time, because I still can't fully describe it. I matched the first number, then the second. By the 4th, I was standing up from my chair without realizing I'd done it. By the 6th, the mega ball, I had to sit back down. All 6 numbers. $750,000. After taxes, as a lump sum through an LLC a financial advisor helped me establish quietly. $480,000. I set the phone down on the counter. I could hear my daughter saying, my name. I couldn't answer yet. I just sat in the kitchen my parents built, looking at a piece of paper my son had handed me as a joke. I didn't call him. I didn't call his wife. I didn't say a word to Cornelius. I called my daughter back and told her. Then I sat quietly for 2 days while my phone rang. If you're still here, subscribe before you keep reading, because what happened next changed not just my life but the lives of people I'd never met. The second thing that happened during those 2 days was actually the one that mattered more than the money. There was a handwritten note that had been sitting in my mailbox for 3 weeks, the kind you miss when you're only checking for bills. My neighbor from 4 blocks over, Mrs. Corrigan, retired school teacher, husband with a bad heart, good people who'd never asked anyone for anything. The note said, Byron, do you know anything about your son Ryland's lending company? We are in serious trouble and we don't know where to turn. I called her. She cried before she could say much. The Corrigans had borrowed $58,000 from my son's company, Piedmont Capital Group LLC, to cover her husband's bypass surgery, 37% APR, their 2019 pickup, and a second lien on their home listed as collateral. Through the Corrigans, I found another family, a couple who'd borrowed $43,000 to cover medical debt, 38% interest. Through them, a young woman who'd borrowed $27,000 to keep her late father's dry cleaning business from closing. She had already paid back $41,000, and her principal had barely moved. 4 families, all trapped in the same kind of agreement that was crushing me. I called a man named Bertram, who had been the social studies department head at my school for years before he retired and went back into law. We'd kept in touch. He had an office near downtown in an old brick building. I handed him all 5 contracts. He read them for a long time without speaking. When he looked up, he said, North Carolina General Statute 24-1.1. Private lenders without a license are capped at 30% annual interest. Byron, every single one of these exceeds that cap. I know. What does it mean? It means these contracts are legally void, unenforceable. Criminal usury is a Class 1 misdemeanor in this state, and if there's a pattern, which is exactly what you've just handed me, the Attorney General can pursue much more serious charges. My house? If the underlying loan is void, the collateral agreement is void with it. He has no legal claim to your property. None. For the first time in 8 months, I took a full breath. I told Bertram about the lottery. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I strongly recommend claiming it through the LLC. Keep your name out of this until you're ready to move. He paused. Are you ready to file with the AG? I signed the complaint Monday morning. 5 contracts, 5 families, the interest rates, the collateral terms, the company name, the pattern. The lottery claim went through the same week. That Tuesday evening, I sent one text to the family group chat. I need to talk to everyone. Video call Friday at 9. Please be there. The responses came within minutes. Portia, of course we'll be there. My son, about time, Dad. Cornelius had been added to the chat months ago, apparently, confirmed. They all assumed they knew what was coming. I let them assume. Friday evening, I sat at my kitchen table. In front of me, a copy of the loan agreement with the interest rate highlighted in yellow. Copies of the other 4 contracts. A summary of North Carolina usury law. A bank statement from the LLC. And one more thing. A screenshot my daughter had quietly forwarded to me without comment. A text thread between my son and his wife from 5 months earlier. Her message, if he misses 2 payments, we move on the house by spring. He's too proud to declare bankruptcy. He'll just keep paying. Her response, perfect. I tested the screen share 3 times. I am not good with technology. I needed this to work. At 9 o'clock, I clicked start. My son and my daughter-in-law appeared together from their place in Miami. He was there for a development conference. He was in a blazer. She had a glass of wine. Cornelius appeared from his study at the estate, looking the way wealthy men look when they've been kept waiting, mildly offended by the premise of it. Dad, Ryland leaned forward. So you finally checked the ticket? I did, I said. We'll get to that. But first, there's something I need you to look at. I shared my screen. The loan agreement appeared. My copy. Every clause visible, the interest rate highlighted in yellow so bright you couldn't look away from it. My son's expression didn't change right away. Something behind his eyes shifted. Did you know, I said, keeping my voice even, that North Carolina caps private lending rates at 30% for unlicensed lenders? Cornelius leaned closer to his camera. What loan? What is he talking about? Portia set down her wine glass. 2 years ago, I said, my daughter was seriously injured at work. Medical bills after insurance came to $94,000. 3 banks turned me down. My son offered me a loan. I was desperate and I signed without reading the fine print. I scrolled to the highlighted clause. 36% APR, compounding monthly. Collateral. My house at 114 Briarwood Lane, valued at $480,000. Cornelius stood up from his chair. He stayed on screen, but he was standing now. My son started, Dad, it's a private agreement between consenting. Cornelius's voice came through sharp and flat. Is this true? I've been paying $2,900 a month for 8 months, I said. My pension is $4,200. I watched the principal barely move. Cornelius turned and looked at my son directly through the camera, the way a man looks when something he believed about someone has just broken in half. You charged your father 36% interest to pay your sister's medical bills. It's a legal private loan. I looked into the camera. It's not legal. 30% is the cap. Every dollar above that is criminal usury. The loan is legally void. The collateral claim on my house is void with it. Portia looked at my son, really looked at him. Did you know it was over the cap when you wrote it? Silence. How much has he paid you? Cornelius asked. $23,200, I said. And according to his amortization schedule, I still owed 89,000 more. Portia stood up. Ryland. There's more, I said. The next document appeared. A contract for $58,000, 37% interest, the Corrigan family's pickup truck, and home equity as collateral. Then the second family. Then the third. Then the fourth. I didn't read them all aloud. I let the numbers and the names fill the screen. Cornelius sat back down. He'd taken his glasses off. He rubbed his face with both hands. The Attorney General's office received a formal complaint Monday morning, I said. All 5 contracts, the interest rates, the pattern of lending, the company name. The investigation opens publicly next week. Portia's voice came through very quietly. There are more people? 4 that I know of, possibly more who haven't come forward yet. The room on both sides of those screens went silent. I said, I'm not done. I opened the last document, the text thread, her words on screen in their own message bubbles. Portia went still the moment she recognized them. I read them aloud. If he misses 2 payments, we move on the house by spring. He's too proud to declare bankruptcy. He'll just keep paying. Perfect. My son's jaw was tight. Portia looked like she'd been handed something she could not put back. I didn't do this to hurt anyone, I said. I did because the families who borrowed from my son's company had no more options than I did, and someone had to tell the truth. Cornelius spoke quietly. Ryland, I'm placing a hold on the $400,000 development credit line I extended to you, effective tomorrow morning. I'll speak with my attorneys this weekend. My son started to say something. Cornelius's screen went dark. Portia wasn't looking at her husband. She was looking at her hands. I said, there's one more thing. The lottery ticket you gave me for my birthday, I said. I checked it. No one on screen moved. $480,000 after taxes. Already claimed. Already in the bank. Portia made a sound that wasn't quite a word. My son's mouth opened and nothing came out. The house is mine, I said. The loan is void. You have no claim to anything I own. That's over. I looked at him one more time. My son, 34 years old, sitting alone in a Miami living room with his world narrowing around him. Goodbye, Ryland. I clicked end call. The screen went dark. The kitchen was quiet. The old clock above the refrigerator, the one my father wound every Sunday morning, ticked the same way it always had. My daughter called 2 minutes later. Her voice was soft. Dad, are you okay? I looked around the kitchen. The table my parents bought at an estate sale. The window that looks out at the backyard where I taught my daughter to ride a bike. I'm okay, I said. For the first time in 2 years, I actually meant it. That was 82 missed calls ago. My son called from Miami that night. I didn't answer. Then from the airport. Then from home. Portia called 4 times Saturday morning. Cornelius left one message. His voice was different than I had ever heard it. He said he was sorry. Not for any specific thing, just sorry. I saved that one. The AG complaint went public the following Wednesday. By Thursday, 2 more families had come forward. By the following Monday, there were 9. 9 families who had borrowed from my son's company, all at rates above the legal cap, all with collateral agreements that gave him the right to take the things they could not afford to lose. Bertram called me on a Thursday afternoon, his voice very measured, which is how I know when something matters. Byron, the Attorney General's office is considering racketeering charges. 9 contracts make a pattern difficult to argue against. I sat with that, my son. My daughter came for dinner that Friday. We made her mother's chicken and biscuit recipe, the one that takes an hour and a half and fills the whole house with something that smells like the right version of home. We didn't talk about her brother much. We talked about her patience, about a young man who was relearning to walk, about what she wants to do with her career in 5 years. At some point, she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Mom would have been proud of you, she said. We sat there in the kitchen my parents built, in the house my son had planned to take, and I let myself feel that. My daughter's medical debt, all $94,000, was paid in full the week the lottery funds cleared. I set aside money to help 3 of the other families with immediate legal costs, quietly through Bertram, without my name attached. I'm using part of the rest to establish a scholarship at Asheville Regional. First-generation college students, the ones who need someone to believe they belong somewhere before they believe it themselves. The kind of kids I spent 31 years watching figure out they were more than anyone had told them. The house got a new roof. The front steps I'd been meaning to fix since 2018 finally got fixed. Small things, the kind you defer until you can't. 6 weeks after the video call, I received a letter from my daughter-in-law. 2 handwritten pages. She said she'd filed for divorce. She said she hadn't known about the other families, but that ignorance didn't excuse 2 years of looking at me the way her father had taught her to look at people without money. She said she was sorry for every dinner, for the birthday, for every time she'd smiled through something she should have said something about. I read it twice and put it in the desk drawer. I haven't responded yet. My son called once, about 3 months later, I answered. He said he wasn't calling for money or for forgiveness. He said he needed me to know he understood what he had done. I let him talk. When he was finished, I said, "I'm glad you're in therapy. I'm glad you're doing the work. But right now, today, I am not ready to have you back in my life. That's not forever. That's just not now." He said he understood. He said he'd wait. I said, "If you're genuinely different in 5 years, call me." We hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a while. He has his mother's eyes. She would have known exactly what to do with all of this. She always did. The lottery ticket is framed on the kitchen windowsill now, right next to the photo of my parents standing in front of this house the year they finished paying off the mortgage. They're both squinting into the sun. They look young and certain of something. My son handed me that ticket at a birthday dinner as a punchline, as evidence that his real loyalty had moved somewhere else, somewhere with better lighting and higher ceilings. He meant for it to mean nothing. It ended up meaning everything. Not because of the money. The money is useful, and I will not pretend it isn't. It paid my daughter's bills and protected my house, and will send some kid from this side of Asheville to college who otherwise might have talked himself out of believing he could go. That is real. But the thing that changed was not the bank balance. It was the moment I stopped making myself small enough to fit inside someone else's idea of what I was worth. I spent 31 years watching frightened teenagers become people who knew how to think, how to push back, how to ask the right questions instead of just accepting the first answer someone handed them. That is not a small life. I don't care whose estate you're standing in when you decide that it is. If you're listening to this, and someone in your life has been handing you a $10 ticket, or a gift card, or nothing at all, while they hand everyone else the world, here is what I want you to know. You don't have to wait for a lottery to know what you're worth. You just have to stop agreeing with people who have decided to tell you otherwise. Drop a 2 in the comments if any part of this stayed with you. Thank you for being here with me tonight. A note before you go. This story includes creative elements crafted for reflection, as these stories do. What matters is the truth underneath it. That your worth is not determined by the room you happen to be standing in, or the gift you happen to be handed. It's determined by the life you choose to build and the people you choose to protect. I'm still building mine. One Friday dinner at a time, with my daughter, in my parents' house, under the old clock that just keeps ticking. That's enough. It always was.